Hey guys, this is OffTopicGames, bringing you another Cardfight Vanguard tips, tricks, and talks. So for this topic we are going over attacking. So the point of attacking in this game, because it's basically like everything, getting damage out of your opponent and cards out of their hand, what we want to do with this video is show you how to attack efficiently or to the best that you can without knowing like triggers and stuff. Or predicting triggers is also a different way to put it. So let's pretend you're the Kagero player. What I'm going to do is show you all the different types of attack patterns that you'll normally see. This is granted that you're not running stands, because not too many decks do, or that for this specific setup, we want it so that there's no like effects and it's just like attacks. It's kind of like a vanilla game. So for this example, let's start here. Example 1. We're at grade 1 and opponent is also at grade 1. So it's both equal power. A 10k block is 1 to pass, so it's normal. If you just have your Vanguard, swing with the Vanguard. That's all you have to do there. It's pretty simple. Let's say your opponent has 1 or 2 rear guards. That's and you only have your Vanguard. In this case, you can do whatever you want. Attack the Vanguard, attack the rear guards. If they have 1 rear guard, and you assume that they don't have another rear guard, you can swing at the rear guard. It's a valid thing. But a lot of times you can just swing with the Vanguard. Because if you hit a crit, it deals 2 damage. But if you swing at the rear guard, the crit is basically nulled. It doesn't do anything. So that's kind of why. It's kind of like this. It just depends on what you want to do. Now, let's say your opponent has no rear guards and you have 1 rear guard and no booster. This is very important. So let's say there's 2 options here. You swing with the Vanguard first or you swing with the rear guard first. What I personally like to do here, there's 2 options, like I said earlier, but there's a safer play and there's kind of a greedy play. So I'll go with the greedy play first. The greedy play first is attack with the Vanguard. The reason why is because you're hoping to hit more triggers to put the opponent so that the opponent either guards more or just straight takes it. So if you, for example, hit a trigger, like presented, put it on the rear guard, your opponent provides a damage check, assuming he doesn't guard. He gets nothing. I'm sorry. He gets nothing. It's a grade 3. Then this attack is now 10k guard. It's not 5k guard. But if you trigger and your opponent triggers, it's the same thing. It's basically a 5k guard. Now, if you don't trigger, if you don't trigger and you hit like a grade 1, sorry, it might be a bit glary, but your opponent hits a trigger, then this entire attack is nulled. So the safer play here is to attack with the rear guard first. So you attack with the rear guard so that if they take it, they hit a trigger and your Vanguard can still hit. So they have to guard for it not to go through. If they don't take it and guard, then fine, that's fine, you got a card out of your hand. So that's the safe play. Now for the next scenario, you have another rear guard that's also a 5k guard without a booster. And your opponent only has rear guard. Only has the Vanguard. In this case, there's 3 different options. Attack with both rear guards first, then the Vanguard. Or attack with the rear guard, attack with the Vanguard, attack with the rear guard. And the last option, attack with the Vanguard first, then both the rear guards. So here's the safe play, the greedy play, and the semi-greedy play, I guess. So the greediest play here, and the one that you shouldn't do, assuming that your opponent only has a Vanguard, is attack with the Vanguard first. This is extremely greedy, because you can potentially lose 2 attacks if you don't hit a trigger, and your opponent does hit a trigger. This is really not recommended. Generally, personally, I wouldn't get into this scenario in the first place. Normally I don't call more than 1 rear guard if my opponent only has the Vanguard, unless I have boosters and stuff and want to push. But I mean, you can. It's very, very fine. It's very aggressive type of a play. Normally I'm not super aggressive, but This really isn't very recommended. So here's the very safe play. What you do is attack the rear guard first to the Vanguard. If they take and hit a trigger, okay, you attack the Vanguard first. And then attack the rear guard first. So this is this pretty safe play. Attacking with the rear guard first, seeing if they have a trigger or not, then attacking with the Vanguard first. Because let's say they're good play and they hit a trigger, and then attacking with the rear guard first. Now, the very, very safe play is attacking the rear guard first, obviously. If they don't hit a trigger, then you attack with the rear guard first, to make sure that this guaranteed hits. And then you attack with the Vanguard first. So that's the options there. Generally speaking, what to note is you always swing with the rear guard first, in this scenario. Because you see what the opponent does, you test the waters. If they guard it, fine, you can choose what to do now. Being the greedy play, since you already attack with this, let's pretend you don't instant triggers, so there's nothing here now. Now you're at that option again that I mentioned earlier, where you have rear guard Vanguard. This is the safe play now. This is the regular play. That's assuming they guarded it or didn't hit a trigger. If you swung with this first and they did hit a trigger then you're forced to swing with the Vanguard first and hope you hit a trigger and they don't hit another trigger. Sorry, it may be a bit confusing, but hopefully you kind of get the point here. So yeah, that's basically it. Let's move on to grade 2. It kind of doesn't matter, but I just want to show you boosters. Because, oh, sorry, I forgot a bit. Let's go back. Here's the grade 1. The grades don't matter too much except for the drive checks, of course, and the power differences. So let's say you have one rear guard open and they have one rear guard open. Now, either play is safer, but now I recommend attacking with the Vanguard first. This is so that you can get the optimal amount of trigger bonuses on the rear guard, and no matter what, they'll have a target. So let's say you swing with the Vanguard first. They no guard, of course. So you hit nothing, and they hit a trigger. They boost power wherever they want, one of the rear guard or the Vanguard, and regardless, your rear guard still has a target to hit. So that's why it's very nice to swing with the Vanguard first in this case. Otherwise, if you swing with the rear guard first, yes, it's fine because it's safe, but you don't get the optimal amount of trigger power that you could have gotten. Let's say that you swung with this at the Vanguard, and they no guarded it, so they hit a trigger. Now, if you swing at the Vanguard, they can 10 it for no pass. Or you can just swing it with the rear guard, and it's kind of like the same thing, but it's kind of not at the same time. It just really depends on the situation. So what, again, I'd recommend is swinging with the Vanguard first, and then the rear guard. Now, if you have 3 rear guards and a Vanguard, and you're at grade 1, oh, this is where it matters, grade 1 versus grade 2. Grade 2 matters because you can intercept. So I guess I'll go with that for a bit. Yes, I'll switch to that grade 2. So we're both at grade 2. Again, if you only have the Vanguard, they only have the Vanguard, then they swing. It's pretty simple. Sorry, I just have to set up here. So, let's say in this case, it's the same scenario basically, but let's say it's something like this. You have 2 rear guards and a Vanguard. Now this is where it kind of gets difficult, because your opponent can intercept, and you have 2 rear guards. If you just have 1 rear guard, it's fairly the same thing as the grade 1. You swing with the Vanguard first, and then swing with the rear guard first. Now, if you have 2, this is where it gets difficult. Personally, you have to deal with the fact that it's very possible for you to lose an attack. But if you swing, like, if you don't hit a trigger, if you swing with the Vanguard first, and you don't hit a trigger but they do, then you lose an attack. let me just show you an example. Oopsie. So you don't hit a trigger, you swing at the Vanguard, they hit a trigger. So they boost the Vanguard, you swing at the rear guard, they take it. So that this one can attack. So you do lose an attack. So you always have to be like kind of cautious. But if you hit a trigger and they hit a trigger, then it's okay, because if you hit a trigger and they hit a trigger, you boost the rear guard, they boost the Vanguard. So triggers here, triggers there. Now after they take the damage, you swing at the rear guard with the unboosted one, and then you swing at the Vanguard with a boosted one, assuming this doesn't go through, or it does go through. If it doesn't go through and they guard it, you can swing at this one for a 10k guard, or they can just take it, because it was a 5k guard anyways. So that's different situations there. Now, if they have 3 rear guards and you have 3 rear guards, then you probably won't ever lose an attack. You just swing with the Vanguard first. Oh, by the way, it's almost always optimal to swing with the Vanguard first, because you run criticals, not stands. If you run stands, it's completely different. You want to swing with the rear guard first. But if you don't run stands, then and you run crits, it's generally better to swing with the Vanguard first. Generally speaking. Yeah, just generally speaking. So you hit a trigger, or you don't hit a trigger. Let's say worst case scenario, you don't hit a trigger and they do hit a trigger. So they put their power on the Vanguard, and you hit a trigger, so you can just swing the rear guards. You don't lose anything there. That's the worst case scenario. So overall, it's pretty good. Now, if you do hit a trigger and they don't hit a trigger, that's also good, because you gain more power. So they 10k guard and 5k guard. And if you both don't hit triggers, then it's the same thing as, yeah. If you don't hit a trigger and they don't hit a trigger, technically speaking, it's the same thing as you not hitting a trigger and they're not hitting a trigger. It just differs between which cards you're attacking. So let me give you an example, because that's something kind of confusing. So you swing with the Vanguard first. They hit a trigger. They boost on the Vanguard. You swing with the rear guards for 5k. That was mentioned before. Now, if you don't hit a trigger, if your opponent doesn't hit a trigger and you don't hit a trigger, they take a damage. Now your rear guards are able to swing at all these 3, but regardless, it's still a 5k. So even though your rear guards have the option to swing in the Vanguard, regardless, it's still a 5k. So my general mindset is, why not swing at a rear guard that can do something if it's a 5k anyways? Yes, they can no guard it, or they can just pop a 5, like a draw trigger, like any other person would. Or you can hope that your opponent will take it, but normally speaking, you don't want to do that. So yeah, but you can swing with the Vanguard, that's fine. But the only thing you have to consider is they might want Counterblast. So that's that. I think generally speaking, I went over most of it, but let's just put with boosters. So let's say you have 1 lane and 1 lane, and they have no rear guards. Simple thing is, tackle the Vanguard first. This is so that you get the most out of your triggers, and even if they hit a trigger, you can still tackle the rear guard. The other option is to tackle the rear guard first, and then the Vanguard first. But this is not something you want to do. I mean, it's kind of safe, but it's not very good. Like, you can argue that if they take this and hit trigger, they tend to pass this, and then you got a 10k out of your hand. But, I mean, then you lose all trigger options available to you. So, you basically kind of like negate all the triggers. Like, let's say you had a crit, now you lose the crit. If you swing through Vanguard first, then you get the crit, and you get the power here. So, it might be super optimal for you, and they take 2 damage, and it's a 15k guard. Now, if again your opponent doesn't have rear guards, and you have 3 rear guards, and 1 is a booster, the safest option is swing with the unboosted rear guard first. This is so that if you swing with the Vanguard first, and they hit a trigger and you don't, the attack the attack won't be like negated. So you want to swing this just to make sure that your attack goes through. Yeah. So if they hit a trigger here, for some reason they take this, they hit a trigger here, both your rear guards, Vanguard and rear guard, can still attack and hit. So this is the safe option. Attack the rear guard first, then the Vanguard, and then the boosted rear guard. That's the generally like accepted attack order. If they have one rear guard, then you're free to swing with the Vanguard first, and then swing the rear guard, and then the rear guard. It's always better to swing with the lower rear guard first, and then the higher rear guard, higher powered rear guard, unless they have like on-hit effects or something special. But we're assuming that all the cards here are vanilla and stuff. And if they have 3 rear guards, then again, you're free to just swing with the Vanguard first, and then the rear guard, and then the rear guard. Now, assuming this one has a booster, it's the same exact concept as previous, but they both have the same power, so you're free to swing with the Vanguard always. Let me just go over it, I guess, really quick. So you have full field. Swing the Vanguard first. If they have only their Vanguard, they can both hit. Or worst case scenario, they hit 2 damage triggers and 1 rear guard can't hit, assuming you hit none. So that one did sound confusing, so let me go over it. You swing the Vanguard first, they take it. You don't hit a trigger. They hit a trigger. They boost the Vanguard. You swing with the Vanguard again. They hit another trigger, which is somewhere. So they hit another trigger. Now this side can't hit. That's the worst case scenario, assuming you did not hit a trigger. That's the absolute worst case scenario. But normally that won't happen. And you couldn't prevent it, because if they had 2 triggers, no matter what you do, you couldn't stop it, unless you had a trigger. So, that's pretty much all. If you're at grade 3 is assuming, like, triggers, stand triggers and effects aside, is the exact same concept. If you have full field, attack the Vanguard first, then the rear guards. Oh, let's assume I'm at grade 3. If you just have a rear guard, oh, you have to make sure it hits. Shoot. If you just have a rear guard that can hit, that's important. Swing the rear guard first, then the Vanguard, then the rear guard. If you have 2 rear guards that can hit, I guess has to be a grade 2, I guess. If you have 2 rear guards that can hit, here's where it gets a little bit different because you're at grade 3. You have 2 drive checks. Regardless, you will swing the rear guard first. But you can be super greedy and swing the Vanguard first. This will ensure that your Vanguard will probably hit, and if you get 2 triggers, it's very possible for them to have to 10k both lanes. Or 21 and 5, but no one wants to guard a 21 lane. So, yeah, that's kind of the general understanding of it is. You don't want to do this because it's very unlikely. But, like, if you want to be really greedy, you can. But it's super not optimal. Because, like I said before, if you hit no triggers and they do, then both your lanes are neutered. And if you hit 1 trigger and they hit 1 trigger, 1 lane is neutered. So you always want to swing with the rear guard first to be safe. This is being safe. So yeah, that's basically it. Same thing as before. If they have a rear guard, that's fine. You just swing at it. Then, to be safe, let's say that hits. To be safe, you swing the rear guard first and then the Vanguard. But if you want to be greedy because you have 2 drive checks, that's very acceptable. So you swing with the Vanguard first and then the rear guard. That's acceptable. Like, you can hit 2 triggers and they hit none. You can hit 1 and they hit 1, which is the same thing. Or you can hit 2 and they can hit 1, or some weird different orders like that. But it's very understandable for you to be a little bit greedy. Now, if they have 3 rear guards, then swing with the Vanguard first. There's no ways you can lose out on attacks if they have 3 rear guards. Again, if it's boosted, or if you don't have a booster, the same concept as a grade 2, but you just get more drive checks. Same thing with stride, but you want to know that stride has a higher base power, so they can't easily 10 for 2 unless they like massive amounts of triggers. So if you're on a stride, it's more acceptable for you to attack with the rear guard first, because it's harder for them to guard the Vanguard anyways, but at the same time you have 3 drive checks, so the probability is you'll probably hit a trigger. So yeah, that's the basic attacking tips, talk, and tricks. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed it and then learned a bit from this video. If you didn't, I'm really sorry. I hope you watched it and got like entertainment out of it or something for me trying to explain this. It's a bit hard, but when you play more, you'll understand it more, and then you'll kind of get the concepts down that I'm trying to show to you. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all next time. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and please like, comment, and subscribe for any questions or concerns or suggestions. Thank you guys.